welcome back to another video. This is Kalandra in the building and you are watching CTV. So for today's video, I'm going to be talking about anxiety. And I've made a video about this before, pretty much how to cope with it, but I don't think people really understand like what it is and how people who suffer from it really feel when they go through it. So yeah, let me talk about that. And I feel like there's a lot of misjudgments about how people with anxiety act or how they handle things or just about how people act in general. Like, we are living in a very judgmental world, so I need to let this be known because not a lot of people talk about this. So especially in the Black community, for some odd reason, it's just like we're just looked at as weird if we're different. Like, we have to all act sort of the same, which is ridiculous to me because everybody is different no matter what color of your skin. So yeah, let me get into this video. So there's anxiety and then there's social anxiety. Social anxiety is very hard to deal with. Like, you don't like to be around a lot of people, you don't like dealing with people, and that's something I'm struggling with. I really hate dealing with people, and that's why I complain about having a 9-to-5. Like, I can get the job done, but sometimes people really bring my anxiety out, especially when I'm working with certain people, and everybody has different viewpoints, and some people can be bitchy for no fucking reason sometimes, and it makes me feel uncomfortable, you know? So dealing with people can be very hard if you're suffering through anxiety, especially if you're dealing with a lot. Like, we're very comfortable when we're dealing with people we're very close to, and we are ourselves 100%. But when you're around people that you're not exactly comfortable with, or people that you wouldn't hang out with on a daily basis, or certain people you're just not like-minded with, it's going to make you feel some type of way. You're not going to feel comfortable. You're not going to want to be yourself around them. And it's very understandable. That's human nature. But for somebody with anxiety, it really affects us twice as more. So yeah, we don't like dealing with people. We don't like, especially if you're an empath and you can pick up on everybody's vibes and emotions and it can affect yours, which is something really hard to have to deal with, is picking up on people's energies and trying not to let it affect you. It's hard, especially if you're going out in public and people may be looking at you weird, or any like setting to where you may have to speak in front of an audience or to sing in front of an audience or whatever. It may make you nervous because, like, nobody likes the feeling of being openly judged by somebody. And regardless, like, people are going to judge you anyway, because that's life. Like, people always have something to say about somebody or something, but it just really affects us. Like, we just don't like that feeling. It just feels like it's like a fucking, your heart's pounding and it makes your stomach hurt. Like, you feel that shit, you know? So yeah, social anxiety is hard to deal with, and different people deal with it in different ways, and some people's anxieties may be worse than others. But I just think people need to be more understanding that just because somebody doesn't like to deal with people all the time doesn't mean they're mean, and it doesn't mean that they're necessarily awkward or just doesn't have any people skills. It's not that. It's just like some people just don't like picking up on everybody's fucking energy. It can drain yours, and that's real talk. So that's one thing about social anxiety that a lot of people go through. Another thing is, like, it kind of goes with the talking in front of an audience or a crowd, or even in general, where you have to talk to certain people, and I go through this too, and you can kind of see on my channel that sometimes you can't explain things right the way you think about it in your mind. It just doesn't come out that way when you're talking, and I hate that shit. I go through that a lot, and with me having this YouTube channel, I'm actually getting better at it, thank God. So yeah, like, knowing what to say and how to articulate your words can be a major struggle, And that doesn't mean you have bad vocabulary. It just means like maybe the words that are in your head are not coming out with your words, if that makes sense. So that's another thing about anxiety that a lot of people may go through. So if you're having a conversation with somebody who has anxiety and they're probably very short with you, or not explaining things right, or don't know how to articulate the way most people can, maybe that's why. So yeah, that's just another thing about that I know I struggle with, and maybe other people do. Many people with social anxiety happen to be introverts. We like to be to ourselves. We feel comfortable, and we feel like that's the best way to protect our energy. There is this singer out there that everybody's talking about. I love Summer Walker, and like people are just going in on her because of how she acts in interviews and how she is with public speaking and at her concerts and stuff. But how is that an act? Like, I don't see how somebody can purposely act that way. She probably really, like, she definitely does have social anxiety, and people think it's out of the norm because she's a celebrity. But just because she has social anxiety doesn't mean that she shouldn't be able to share her gift. She just probably needs time to get comfortable with being around people. And I'm not saying it's not possible if you have social anxiety. It's possible to be able to be around people and be yourself and be confident, because confidence is also another thing that we struggle with. But it takes time. It takes a lot of time and patience and just self-reflection within yourself to be able to go out and be normal to other people. So yeah, so just because somebody may cancel plans with you, or they don't want to go out or be at the club all the time, does that mean that they're weird? It just means that it's just not for them. Many people with social anxiety rather be in their house chilling, watching a movie, or taking a walk and being in nature or something different. So the club scene isn't for everybody, and if you're somebody with social anxiety, it's probably hard for you to go to the club scenes or do anything where there's like a bunch of people, unless you're like under the influence of, weed, alcohol, whatever it is. I don't promote drug use, especially if it's something that is like out there that's crazy, I would just say weed and alcohol, whatever. That's usually how we loosen ourselves up and get comfortable in these situations. So just because somebody may be at the club twerking or having a good time don't mean that they don't suffer through anxiety. Like, everybody has a club persona and a public persona, and then their own selves, if that makes sense. Like, everybody has a different sort of ego, I would say. And people with anxiety tend to have that. Like, we have our outgoing wild sides, and then we have our normal sides to where we may struggle with dealing with people and dealing with certain situations. And another thing that a person with anxiety, now I'm not even talking about social anxiety at this point because I think I covered that, but anxiety in general is we get overwhelmed kind of pretty easily. Like, in tough situations, like, it's really hard to be able to keep our cool and not get super nervous when, like, we're taking a test or you're doing a job or just basic everyday things. Like, when I first started driving, I used to get bad anxiety with that. Like, just to think that my life can be taken away at any given second. Now I'm definitely more comfortable with driving. But before, I wasn't the biggest fan. Like, I did it if I had to go somewhere, but I wasn't the biggest fan of driving. If you know me, you know. Another thing that can trigger somebody's anxiety is the fact that most people tell people to be themselves, and which we all should. But once somebody decides that they want to be themselves, and people just judge them, and think they're weird, crazy, stupid, whatever, that's something that can trigger somebody to be anxious and not able to express themselves like they want to. And that's another struggle with anxiety. Like, I know I can be myself, and I wouldn't ever want to be anybody else, but I'm not going to be 100% around people that I just don't want to be around, or people that I'm not comfortable with. And yeah, so I just feel like we need to stop judging each other and learn to understand people and the way they think, because if everybody in this world were to be the same, it would be a very boring world. There wouldn't be creative people. Everything would kind of be the same. I don't think anybody wants to be in a world where everybody thinks the same. And yes, like, we can all be, like, some people can be like-minded, but even like-minded people, we all have some sort of different way of thinking. So you just got to keep in mind to be open to other people and the way other people carry themselves, especially if they're not doing anything to harm you personally. Just be patient with people. Like, you don't have to be an asshole. You don't have to be judgmental, and you don't have to think that people are slow, stupid, or just putting on a fucking act. Because people really suffer through this shit, and it could cause more issues like depression or suicidal thoughts, or just not loving yourself, or thinking that you're not good enough or worthy enough for the world or for whatever you want. And regardless of how different you are and what kind of person you are, we all deserve to be aligned with what we really want to do in this life. So if you have anxiety, just be yourself, and to be patient with yourself, and just reflect on your actions and reflect on how you want to improve your condition. I'm not saying you have to let anxiety take over your whole life, because I don't like people who are like that when they're so anxious that they use it for an excuse for everything. Like, people don't like that, and that's probably why people judge so much about it. But at the same time, it's like, people who aren't suffering through that, which I think everybody suffers some type of anxiety, should be more patient with people who do. And people who do need to learn how to cope with it. So that's my opinion on anxiety. But if you have anxiety, don't feel bad about yourself. Like, you're human. We all have emotions. And having anxiety and being different, or whatever the case, is not a bad thing. You're able to express yourself differently from other people. You may like something that's different from other people, and you have something different to offer this world that other people may not have. Like, you have a gift, and you need to find that gift, because we need more expressive people into this world, because we are living in a world of judgmental ass bots. And that's exactly what they are. Like, people who just think, well, how do I say this? Like, we're living in a matrix, but people who just think simple-minded. You don't want to deal with simple-minded people. You don't want to be a simple-minded person, especially not about everything. Go outside of the box and accept that people are different, and learn to be different, and embrace your way of thinking, and don't worry about the society standards of everybody else's thinking and how everybody should look or act. If we're not harming each other, then there's no point of hating each other. Yeah. And I think I touched on everything about it. So if you like this video, hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe, and turn on your post notifications so you know every video that I post. I know I post every week, and I didn't post last week. I had a lot of shit going on, so I'm back on track. I'm going to be posting every week, so yeah, stay tuned, and peace out.
Yeah, little bitch. Yeah.